I'm awarding Wanda Ni-sun use of the house until the children graduate from high school. Mr. Ni-sun will continue to make all mortgage and utility payments on the house. She will also receive half the value of the business her husband owns. Miss Ni-sun will keep her vehicle and Mr. Ni-sun will continue the payments for said vehicle. I am also awarding Mrs. Ni-sun 60% of all assets, including all bank accounts, investments, and retirement accounts. Furthermore, I'm awarding primary custody of the children to Mrs. Ni-sun. Visitation will follow the standard protocols of Mr. Ni-sun having 2 consecutive weeks during the summer and every other weekend. Child support will be $750 per month per child for a total of $1,500 per month. Since Mrs. Ni-sun has not worked outside of the home for the last 5 years, I am also adding maintenance for Mrs. Ni-sun in the amount of $2,000 per month. The divorce will be final in 90 days unless Mr. Ni-sun revokes the petition. With that, the Honorable Judge Marie Matthews banged her gavel to end the proceedings. She was just beginning to stand when I uttered the single word that led to changes that would dominate the next several months of my life. No. Judge Matthews froze mid-stance, her head swiveling so fast to look at me that I'm surprised her neck didn't snap off. She had a look of disbelief on her face that was quite startling. It was as if she simply couldn't believe that someone had the audacity to state that word in her presence. Slowly, she reversed her movements and came back to rest in her chair. As she was moving, her features changed from shock to abject fury. Once she had regained her former position, the frosty glare she aimed at me could easily have frozen water on the surface of the sun. "Excuse me," she challenged. "I'm not sure what is difficult to understand. Are you confused with the N or the O? If that word is so difficult for you to understand, I would gladly give you a definition of it. I'm not stupid. I know full well what is about to happen. The thing is, I really don't care. I had actually planned for this. The next few minutes were going to be extremely enjoyable for me. I will give you 1 minute to apologize or I will cite you for contempt of court." "Well, at least you will have given one correct ruling today then." "I have nothing but contempt for this railroad you are running here," I spoke. My lawyer was whispering harshly in my ear as he began fumbling through his briefcase. I wondered if he was searching for something to gag me with. "In that case, let's see how much contempt you have after spending 30 days in jail," she sneered as she banged her gavel again. Well, I didn't realize that we had been transported to Australia. We must have been though because of all the kangaroos in here. My lawyer was becoming really distracting as he almost yelled at me to shut up and tried to put his hand over my mouth. 60 days. Care to try for more? You know, your dishonor, I truly believe that if you got laid every once in a while, you wouldn't be such a... That being said, why don't you take this? I held up my right hand with the middle finger extended. And shove it up your dried up nowhere. While this was happening, I extended my left hand similarly to my right. Goes up your constipated a-hole. Then you can ride them to climax. That might actually make you less of the man-hating psychotic you are. The way I see it, you are in more dire need of a dick than any woman in history. Holy. I really thought that someone would be calling 911 at that time. I figured one of 2 things was about to happen. Either she was about to have a stroke or her head was going to explode. I was actually surprised that the smoke coming out of her ears wasn't visible. I didn't think that it was even possible for someone's face to turn that shade of red. Death rays were being shot into me from her eyes. 90 days. I swear her voice was actually satanic. Fortunately for my lawyer, that's when the bailiffs took hold of me. He had such a woeful look on his face that I felt sorry for him. Everyone in the courtroom was shocked when I simply couldn't hold it in any longer and began laughing hysterically. That probably explains the visits by the psychologists I had in lockup over the next couple of weeks. The letter from my lawyer's law firm the next day stating that they were dropping me as a client was not a surprise. So you were probably wondering what all that was about. Perhaps a little background is in order. My name is Michael Ni-sun. I'm currently 31 years old. I was born to a very nice middle-class couple in the heartland of America. I was raised on traditional values where there was a strong sense of right and wrong. You respected those that deserved respect. You didn't cheat. When you gave your word, it meant something. Work hard, be generous with what you have, and live up to your values. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Of course, most people never think about the flip side to that. Do unto others as they have done unto you. The Christian thing to do is to turn the other cheek. Unfortunately, I have never been good at that. I've always had what has been described as an extreme stubborn streak. Combine that with my sense of justice and well, it sometimes got kind of ugly. When I made up my mind that someone had done me wrong and set a course of action to deal with it, nothing could dissuade me from my path. There was one time in high school when I was going out with Cheryl Haskins. We had been going out for a couple of months by this time. We had an argument about something that I don't even remember, and words were said leading us to break up. I put that in quotes because it was kind of understood that it was only temporary and we would apologize to each other a couple of days later and get back together. It wasn't the first time that it happened. We would just use the weekend to cool off and make up on Monday. Unfortunately, I happened to be walking past the theater Saturday evening and saw my cousin Harold escorting Cheryl into the theater. Two things here, Harold and I were more like brothers than cousins. We were the same age and had been practically inseparable for as long as I can remember. His family lived on the same block as me and we grew up together. Second, I knew that he also liked Cheryl. He knew that we had broken up, but he also knew that we would probably get back together after the weekend. But he simply didn't do that to each other. From that moment on, he was dead to me. When Cheryl tried to talk to me on Monday, I simply refused to even acknowledge her presence. At church on Sunday, Harold came up to me and tried to talk. I simply stared at him without saying a word. When he finished talking, I simply turned around and walked away. His family came over for Sunday dinner and I ignored him. He tried to play video games with me and I simply stopped playing and went to my room. Our parents tried several times to get me to talk to him, but I refused every time. Even a year later, after I actually stole his girlfriend from him, I still refused to have anything to do with him. Oh, I did kick his ass when he confronted me about stealing his girlfriend, but that was it. He sent me an invitation to his wedding years later and I ignored it. When I married Wanda, every member of my extended family got an invitation except him. Okay, so I'm a bit of an a-hole and hold a grudge. The thing is, when someone does me wrong, I don't forgive unless it was an honest mistake. What Harold and Cheryl did was done on purpose. Right now, a lot of you are thinking that I'm an a-hole. If that's the case, let me piss off you snowflakes a bit more. I firmly believe that you shouldn't do the crime if you can't do the time. If you are stupid and screw up, you should fully suffer the consequences of your actions. If you drive drunk and get caught, expect to lose your license for a while, pay higher insurance, and perform community service or whatever else is involved. If your job depends on you driving, you lose your job. I call that a stupid tax. If a girl chooses to spread her legs without protection and ends up pregnant at 18 years old, her stupid tax is being called mommy for the next 18 years. If a guy chooses to bump bellies with his prom date and knocks her up, he should be required to man up and take care of the kid he was half responsible for creating. Choices have consequences. It's called personal responsibility. I refuse to have to pay for someone else's idiocy. So I worked hard through high school and got pretty good grades. I got some nice scholarships and went to college. I did okay with the ladies and still kept my grades up. I was always on the better-looking side and I worked to maintain my health. Yeah, I had gotten into more than my fair share of fights in high school because of my personal beliefs. I won more than I lost. Still, I was in good physical shape and it seemed that the women found me attractive enough. I graduated with an economics degree and an accounting minor. I went on to get my MBA, then got a decent job at a large company making really good money. Being single with not a lot of bills to pay, I began playing the stock market. I found I kind of had a knack for that and made out rather well. I had been working for a few months when I met Wanda at a party. We hit it off well and I asked her out on a date. She accepted and it went from there. I have to say she was beautiful. I kind of laugh at that. Seriously, how many guys ever say that their girlfriend is but ugly? Sure, she may be ugly to someone else, but to them she is beautiful. Anyway, I can say that Wanda is beautiful because she always attracts stares whenever we are out, and every one of my friends has commented on how they will try to move in if we ever break up. Even some of my lesbian friends have commented on trying to turn her if she becomes available. I eventually asked and she accepted. We got married. I should probably mention that Wanda did go to college. I like to joke that she went for her M degree. She didn't get that, but she did graduate with a degree in art history which qualified her for her job as a barista at Starbucks. For those who are confused, an MRS degree signifies a girl that goes to college so she can put off adulting for a few years and graduate with a husband to take care of them for the rest of their lives. Yes, I'm an arrogant prick. Also, we settled into marital bliss. She quit her job a week before the wedding and settled into becoming Susie Homemaker. Our sex life was great and we bought a nice 3-bedroom house. I was doing well at my job as well as raking in some nice money playing the stock market. We weren't really living extravagantly, so we were able to put aside quite a bit of cash. All my bonuses went into our investments along with maxing out my WTH contributions. I had a goal of retiring before I was 40 and enjoying the hell out of life. I was damn good at what I did, and my employer rewarded me with hefty bonuses and promotions. I was on the fast track up the corporate ladder. A few years after our marriage, I came home from work one Friday evening to find Wanda dressed to the nines. She had a huge smile on her face as well. "Hurry up and get showered and changed. We're going out to celebrate tonight, Daddy." Holy! Did she just say what I thought she said? I was shocked. We had been trying for a few months now, so it wasn't like this just came out of the blue. Still, it was a surprise when she said that it finally happened. I took her in my arms and swung her around as I planted kisses all over her face. Figuring that we would be muting our celebrations because of her pregnancy and then the baby for a while, we lit up the town that night. The next several months consisted of joyous times and preparing for the new life that we were bringing into the world. We got another shock a couple of months later, twins. There were 2 little girls in there. I couldn't wait until I could start spoiling them and having 2 little daddy's girls wrapping me around their fingers. I was on top of the world. The day finally came and we rushed to the hospital. Our 2 little girls were born a few hours later. They were beautiful, healthy, and had all their fingers and toes. Being twins, they had to stay in the hospital a couple of days longer than normal, but everything turned out fine. When we took them home, both families were there to greet us. Everyone was happy. I noticed my mom staring at them almost constantly. I think she was so happy because I finally gave her the grandchildren she had been wanting. So, life had changed for us. I decided that working for the big company was keeping me away from my family too much. I had a pot full of money available, so I decided to form my own company. I was doing pretty well investing and playing the market, so I decided to get the necessary licenses and open my own investment firm. I had already been helping a few of my friends and relatives, so I talked to them about becoming official clients. That started things moving. Once I opened, I had several former coworkers move their portfolios over to me as well. Within a year, I had a decent client list, and several of them were discussing with their friends about moving over to me as well. When you're on top of the world, the only direction you can go is down. It was the girls' second birthday party. We turned it into a full-on production. Sure, they would never remember it, but it was a celebration. They would be able to watch the videos when they were older and enjoy it then. All the family from both sides were there. We were all having a phenomenal time until I was just about to come out of the bedroom after using the en-suite bathroom. The hall bathroom had been in use. Just before I was about to get to the door, I heard my mom talking to her sister in the hallway. "I just can't figure out where those blue eyes came from," Mom said. "Have you asked Michael about it?" my aunt asked. "Oh God, no. I can't even imagine what would happen if he found out that they weren't his. He's so happy that would probably kill him." I couldn't listen to the rest. I quietly retraced my steps back to the bathroom and locked the door behind me. I had to think. They had to be mine. Surely someone in our families had blue eyes. My eyes were kind of a mud brown, Wanda's were more hazel, I thought. I went through a mental picture of everyone on all my relatives. The only one I could think of that didn't have brown eyes was my cousin Mary. Her eyes were green, but that came from her father's side and he wasn't a blood relative. I then began thinking about Wanda's family. I couldn't think of anyone on her side with blue eyes. After a while, I figured that I needed to calm down and rejoin the festivities before I was missed for too long. I somehow managed to fight down my feelings, put on a happy face, and return to the party. It was hell for the rest of the day. I did manage to act like everyone expected, but I was mentally making some plans on what I was going to do later. Eventually, things died down and everyone left. Putting the girls to bed that night, I examined their features closely. Several features I could see from Wanda, others I didn't recognize. I found none that I could definitely say were from me. The next day, I was on my computer while Wanda took a nap with the girls. I ordered a few supplies to be delivered to my office. I used a company credit card so Wanda wouldn't see the invoice. I also did some research on local PI firms. The suspicion that Wanda had cheated on me almost 3 years ago was becoming overpowering. If she did cheat on me, then was she still cheating on me? I needed proof if she was. A few days later, the items I ordered arrived. I had also met with and hired a company called Pro Investigations. I gave them all of the info on Wanda's cell phone, tablet, and laptop that they needed to hack in. I had also begun making some financial moves as well. If she wasn't cheating and the girls actually were mine, these moves wouldn't really make any difference. However, if what I thought was true, it would make all that money out of her reach. I'll be damned if I was going to pay for her to screw around, and I damn sure wasn't going to pay for someone else's kids. Sure, the girls are innocent victims here, but so am I. She wants to screw around and get knocked up by someone else, let them pay for it. Nothing was set yet, but I was just waiting on the proof. It was 2 weeks later that I got the letter at the office. I had closed and locked my door before opening it. I cried for an hour when I found out that they were not mine. Deep down, I had already known that, but I had been hoping that I was wrong. My PI met with me the next day and gave me all the proof he had gotten. Her personal trainer at the gym was blonde-haired and blue-eyed. She was still seeing him a couple of days a week. She even took the girls to his apartment with her so he could interact with his daughters. Yeah, the audio confirmed that they both knew who the real sperm donor was. I had an appointment with a divorce lawyer the next afternoon. I'm not stupid. I already figured that the law was going to tie me to a table and drill my bottom without the benefit of lube. He gave me his advice and I soundly rejected it. He explained how the law worked. I explained how I worked. He told me that it wasn't about being fair, it was about taking care of the kids. I agreed. She and her lover could take care of the kids without me or my money. I gave him my requirements and left. I think he was beginning to think that he probably should have rejected me as a client then. Little did he know. I had told him to prepare the documents but hold them until I called and let him know I was ready to file. I may have given him the mistaken impression that I was going to try and work things out. Okay, I lied through my teeth about that. It took 2 months. Everything was completed and she hadn't even gotten the slightest whiff of a problem. Thank God for that drama class I took as my art elective during my junior year. I had finally gotten to the point where I had, at least on paper, 0 net income and 0 assets. Well, except the house and a beat-up Chevy pickup. The house still had a heavy mortgage on it. We had refinanced and took out the equity for some upgrades, so selling it probably wouldn't even cover the brokerage fees. My Lexus was actually owned by the company, not me personally. I had about $10,000 in cash hidden away to live on for the next couple of months. Wanda was really surprised when my cousin Howard and his wife Cheryl showed up that weekend. I explained that Howard and Cheryl had come to see me in my office a couple of weeks ago. After some serious discussions, they acknowledged that what they had done was wrong. They sincerely apologized and I decided that it was time to let things go. Goddamn, you people are so gullible. Yes, we made up. It is absolutely true that Howard and Cheryl did come and see me in my office last week. Yes, they did apologize again. That is all very much true. I'm an honest man. I seriously am not lying about any of that. I actually did forgive them and welcome them back into my life. I may have neglected a couple of irrelevant facts, though. Coincidences, really. Cheryl's family has several members that are, well, let's just say not above bending a few minor laws. Several of them are also quite large and have no compulsion against becoming involved in the occasional barroom brawl. Although I put absolutely no stock in rumors, it has been mentioned on more than a few occasions that 4 or 5 of them may possibly be enforcers for one of the local shadier groups of businessmen. Of course, that's just speculation by gossips who just don't like them. Even though this is completely irrelevant to the story, a couple of days before Howard and Cheryl came over to visit, there was a story on the news about a personal trainer at one of the local gyms who was mugged shortly after leaving work. He apparently was foolish enough to attempt to fight it out with the 5 muggers. Along with the criminals taking his wallet, car, and stripping him naked, they proceeded to beat the crap out of him, leaving him with a broken jaw, shattered nose, a few broken ribs, broken arm, dislocated kneecap, and both testicles were ruptured. He will be in the hospital for a couple of weeks at least. The police really should do something about the crime in this town. Unfortunately, there are no suspects since all the attackers wore dark clothes, gloves, and ski masks. The doctors did state that the blonde-haired, blue-eyed victim would likely make a full recovery after reconstructive surgery to his face and significant physical therapy. It would be unlikely that he would be capable of engaging in sexual intercourse ever again. He would be finding out over the next couple of months that his car was taken to a chop shop and sold in pieces, his credit cards had been maxed out, his bank accounts were cleaned out, and the info in his wallet was used to steal his identity and put on the dark web. He would be fighting that for years to come. Oddly, Wanda was rather despondent and mopey for about a week or so after the mugging. My only guess is that she is also worried about the increasing crime rate in the area. I did offer to increase the security for the house for her, but that didn't seem to placate her too much. Monday morning, I called my lawyer and asked him to finish the paperwork and get it filed. I wanted her served on Friday late afternoon. He tried to talk me into some changes, but I was adamant. On Tuesday, the forms were ready for my review and signature. I met him at his office to finalize everything. He again warned me against my course of action. Thinking about it, I decided to humor him. I gave her the house. Hell, I even threw in the investments. Of course, I stipulated that I would not pay a dime for anything else. If she wanted to keep the house, she could pay the mortgage and utilities for it. Oh, and there hadn't been a dime in the investment accounts for over a month. I had no problem giving her 100% of zero. What Wanda didn't realize was that I had been moving all my tools and equipment out of the garage. I had also been slowly moving things that I wanted to keep out of the house. Most of that was from my home office. Tools and larger stuff were being stored out on the ranch that Howard and Cheryl owned. Smaller stuff that wasn't really valuable was transferred to a small one-bedroom apartment in a complex owned by an offshore LLC. The owners of the LLC were surprisingly difficult to locate and verify. Friday morning finally came. I headed off to work as normal. I had Howard help me move my truck to the office a couple of days earlier. I dropped off my car, got into my pickup, and drove to the bank. Once at the bank, I cleaned out all the accounts, leaving $100 in checking and savings. I then went to the safety deposit box and cleaned that out as well. I drove over to the ranch and put all the cash and contents of the safety deposit box with my other possessions. I didn't want to take the chance of them finding a newly rented box at another bank and seizing it. I also didn't want anyone to trace a wire transfer either. Besides, I would probably need the cash later. You may be wondering why I was trusting Howard and Cheryl. It was rather simple, you see. The mortgage on their ranch was being held by a certain offshore LLC with rather murky ownership. Besides, even though we had our issues, he's still family. To us, you do not screw with family. The rest of the family takes things like that personally. There was a lot of happiness in the family when Howard and I finally made our peace. I made my way back to the house. It was late morning by this time. I pulled over a couple of blocks away and checked the GPS that I had installed on Wanda's car. Sure enough, she was at the mall, as expected. I hurried home and parked in the driveway. I had packed up the rest of my clothes and belongings over the past couple of days and set them in the garage. Tossing the few boxes in the truck, I went inside and grabbed the rest of my clothes from the closet and dresser. I didn't even bother packing them up. I just grabbed them by the armload, hangers and all. It only took a couple of trips to toss them all inside the cab of the truck. I didn't even bother closing the garage door or even the front door. My cell phone rang as I was leaving the house. It was Wanda. My guess is that her cards didn't work when she tried to check out with her purchases. I took one last look at the GPS signal and saw that it was moving in this direction. I just laughed, tossed my phone onto the table and walked out the door. Minutes later, I was several blocks away. I arrived at my new apartment and transferred everything from my truck into the appropriate rooms. 3 beers later and everything was put away. I had just sat back in my recliner when my new cell phone rang. There were only a couple of people who had this number and my soon-to-be ex-wife was not one of them. "Hello," I answered. "She's been served. You should have the video shortly," the voice said. "Okay, thank you," I responded before disconnecting. Sure enough, 15 minutes later, I received the video over my email. To say she was shocked would be an understatement. Unfortunately, I only had the video from her actually being served until she dropped to the floor like a sack of rocks. The man who served her checked to make sure that she wasn't actually injured, then turned and left. The video ended at that point. I would have liked to see her reaction once she actually began reading the divorce petition and realized that I had DNA as well as video evidence on her infidelity. From that point on, things moved with all the speed of a glacier. I got several phone calls. There were a few from my old office. She had called multiple times to try and talk to me. Apparently, she didn't believe them when they told her that I had resigned and hadn't worked there for the last 2 weeks. Then she actually showed up in person, demanding to see me. That didn't turn out well for her. It took the police being called to escort her off the property to get rid of her. Howard called a couple of times. She began harassing him to try to get a hold of me. I think she figured out that him suddenly showing up was just a bit too coincidental with my suddenly divorcing her. Restraining orders for both my former company and Howard were filed before she finally had to leave them alone. It was 2 weeks later before my lawyer finally contacted her to find out who her lawyer was. She hadn't gotten one yet. First off, she was quickly running out of money. Really, all she had was the cash in her purse and a total of $200 that I left in the bank accounts. She was starting to lean on her parents for support. I was just hanging out and relaxing. I wasn't going to start on any projects for a while because I was planning on not being available for a while. That and I didn't want anything laying around that she could take from me. She finally did get a lawyer. Meetings were scheduled. I declined to attend and simply gave my lawyer his instructions. My position is firm, not a single penny more. I am led to understand that tempers flared at those meetings. It eventually came to arbitration. Those I had to attend. They didn't go well. Where's all the money? What money? All our money. We don't have any money. We are flat broke. In fact, I'm living in the cheapest single-bedroom apartment that I could find. Seriously, I was just because it was cheap. Since I happen to know the actual owner of the complex. All the investments, the checking, the savings, all gone. I made a really bad investment. Does investing in a cheating wife count? Lost it all. Well, that was true. I didn't know exactly where all those offshore banks actually kept their cash. We're giving her the house with her name as the only one on the title, offered my lawyer. Sure, he could have been a bit more forceful on that. Instead, he sounded more like someone looking at a tornado-ravaged house and commenting that at least the rubble hadn't caught on fire. It's mortgaged to the hilt and there's no way I can possibly afford the monthly payments, Wanda screamed. It pretty much went downhill from there. Child support. Not my kids, not my problem. Spousal maintenance. Alimony for you fistin' out there. No job, no income, no way. She's demanding 70% of the liquid assets. No assets. Look all you want, ain't nothing to be found. 50% of the business. Good luck with that one. 50% of the retirement. What part of lost it all are you having trouble with? Yeah, arbitration failed spectacularly. That leads us to our day in court. As mentioned at the beginning, it was in front of the very dishonorable Judge Marie Matthews. She was the most feminist, man-hating family court judge in the history of the world. She actually seemed to be even harsher on men whose wives had cheated on them. Of course, if it was the man who cheated, he would usually need to be carried out of the courtroom after his balls were removed by her gavel. Yeah, I was screwed. So, y'all are planning on leaving me a bunch of comments for being stupid enough to think that I could successfully convince them that there was no money. You would be wrong. I knew full well that they could simply look at the accounts from a couple of months ago and see how much was in there. I was not the least bit surprised when the judge used those numbers to calculate exactly how far the screws were going to be turned into me. The thing is, they had no way to access it. I needed the time. Time in order to transfer it around through different banks and different accounts. I even went so far as to personally pull all the money out of one bank, then go to a few separate banks and deposit parts of the withdrawal into several other accounts. Of course, those accounts were in several different names. One of those rather shady businesses that Cheryl's family was involved with was a gag gift shop where you could buy fake IDs for entertainment purposes only. That was even printed on the ID cards. I had one that even said I was Jesus Christ. I loved it when I would pull a prank. The victim would exclaim, "Jesus Christ." Then I would pull out my phony ID and agree with them. The fakes were really well done, and the only way to really know they were fake was because of the entertainment statement on the front. They usually cost about $50. For a few more zeros, they would accidentally leave off the entertainment warning on the front. I then electronically transferred the money into other accounts. Sure, there might be a way to track it down, but it would be extremely expensive and take months, if not years. By that time, I would be long gone. So here I was, back in front of the man-hating witch. It had been 60 days into my 90-day stay as a guest of the county. These short-term sentences were done in the county jail, not state prison. So, have you learned your lesson yet? She sneered. You mean the lesson about not marrying a cheating B***TCH? I learned that one long before I was ever in your court. I was referring to your attitude in my court. The vein on her forehead was beginning to pop. I didn't think that was too good for her blood pressure. Can't say that I find anything wrong with my attitude while I was being railroaded in front of a bunch of kangaroos. I was seriously beginning to worry about her health. Her blood pressure must peg the meter during her doctor's visits. You are aware that I can extend your stay in jail, aren't you? And if that's the way you intend to be, I'm adding another 30 days. Now, I brought you here today to discuss why you haven't made your first 2 child support or maintenance payments to your ex-wife. And where's your lawyer? Odd. I was under the mistaken impression that you needed to be really smart to be a judge. Thank you for correcting me on that. Perhaps I can explain it to you so you can understand it. Sorry if it's still over your head, but the lowest I can go is so a 5th grader can comprehend it. Do try to keep up. I really was becoming concerned about her bench catching on fire from the flames she was snorting at that point. I was starting to think that she actually didn't like me. I am in jail. I have no access to any money. Since I have no access to any money, I am unable to send any money. Since it was your dumbass that put me there, perhaps you can explain why you were the reason that the cheating woman can't get the money that you were trying to steal from me to give to that 304. Now, did you get all that, or do I need to explain it to you slower? So, I was escorted back to my cell for another 90 days, 30 from my original sentence, 30 from her first tirade, and another 30 that I managed to catch at the end. To be honest, it really wasn't that bad. Sure, the food sucked, but I still ate it. I had a nice bed to sleep in and lots of free time to relax. I made good use of the weights and exercise machines. I didn't have many problems in there. First off, it didn't take too long for my courtroom antics to become common knowledge inside the jail. That made me a few friends. Second, did I mention that Cheryl's family has a few connections that could be of help to someone on the inside? In fact, there was only one problem. It came from one of Wanda's less intelligent cousins. He had the wild idea that he could get arrested for something small, get sent to the jail for a week or so, and use the time to teach me a lesson. First off, literally the entire jail population knew exactly who he was before he even set foot inside the compound. From there, it didn't take much brain power to figure out what he was up to. He was spotted halfway across the yard. Unfortunately, one of the inmates ran into him as he was trying to catch an errant pass while tossing a football back and forth. I'm sure the elbow to his gut was purely accidental. Once he was able to stand up and brush himself off, he stupidly continued on his quest. After another 20 feet, he got beamed in the side of his head by a basketball. The guy who made the bad pass apologized profusely. The elbow to the chin while he was being helped up was completely accidental. After shaking his head to clear the cobwebs, he again began his trek in my direction. There were 2 more incidents before he finally arrived at his destination. Since my back was turned, he thought that a sucker punch would be a good idea. Unfortunately, I was far from clueless. Before he even had time to bring his fist back, I got the signal, spun around, and drove my foot into his crotch as hard as I could. It was a clear 65-yard field goal. Since his misfortune from all the accidents seemed to finally catch up with him, he was taken to the infirmary. 2 days later, he refused to come out to the yard to exercise. He spent as much time as he could in his cell until he was released. And I'm back before the evil queen. Are you ready to apologize for your vile outburst in this courtroom? I really don't know what you were talking about. Whatever. Perhaps you can at least keep a civil tongue in your head and not extend your stay. So, I take it that another judge is taking over then? Boy, you are standing on my last raw nerve. Are you telling me that I should start stomping my feet now? I should probably see if they have a suggestion box around somewhere. I need to suggest that they have EMTs posted in the courtroom in case she actually has a stroke. Again, you have not paid a single child support or maintenance payment yet. You have also failed to pay the mortgage on the house or any of the utilities as I ordered. I thought that we went through this last time. I can't pay anything as long as I'm cooling my heels here in jail. Second, since you put me in jail, I can't work and make any money to pay anything. Third, they ain't my kids, so I don't know why I would pay anything for them. Fourth, my ex-wife is a cheating 304, and I don't think I should have to pay for her to screw around on my dime. If she wants to screw anything that moves, she should get a job and pay for her own sex life. Maybe she can start charging for it and make some money that way. And finally, you gave her half the business. She should have plenty of money from that. Your Honor, Wanda's lawyer piped up, we have been unable to take possession of my client's part of the business. It seems that Mr. Nielsen sold his company to an overseas company approximately 2 months before he filed for divorce. At this time, we haven't even been able to determine who the actual owners are in order to contact them about the court order. Suddenly, a rather attractive woman stood up and asked to approach. Your Honor, I represent the board of directors for the firm that purchased the business in question. I have a motion here to dismiss the ruling giving Mrs. Nielsen any part of a business formerly owned by her ex-husband. It is highly irregular to award one party any ownership of a business that is not party to the court case in question. Since the purchase was completed prior to the divorce being filed, this company has no bearing on this case. Therefore, we reject any claim of ownership in said business by Mrs. Nielsen. But what about the money from the sale? Wanda, the transfer of ownership and payments were made overseas. I am not privy to that information, but my understanding is that the money from the purchase has never entered U.S. territory and is therefore not subject to U.S. laws. I'm afraid that you will have to take any claim on that money up with your ex-husband. That may need to take place in whichever country the money is located in. What country is that? My ex-wife's lawyer asked. The original transfer of funds was in Belgium, but my understanding is that the money was transferred somewhere else shortly after the sale. I have no idea where it was transferred to, the young woman replied. Your Honor, my ex's lawyer spoke up again. My client is desperate right now. The house is going into foreclosure because the mortgage hasn't been paid in 3 months. The utilities are about to be cut off. My client's parents were able to help a bit when this first began, but it is getting to be too much for them. My client has found a job, but it is waitressing at a local diner. It doesn't pay near enough to maintain the house. Mr. Nissan, you have 1 week to bring all the payments up to date. Oh sure, absolutely. Here, let me bend over and just pull the cash out of my crack. Oops, there isn't any there. Sorry. Unfortunately, I am physically unable to comply. Perhaps I haven't explained it clearly enough. I am in jail. I have no access to any money that you all think that I have. I can't work because I'm in jail, so I can't get any cash that way either. You keep thinking that I have all this money laying around in my cell. Ask the guards. They check it every week. You keep ordering me to pay but don't give me the opportunity to do it, I admonished. Mr. Nissan, you can have your lawyer access your accounts and transfer the funds to your ex-wife. First off, as you can clearly see, I do not have a lawyer. Second, what accounts? You keep talking about these phantom accounts, but where are they? I keep trying to explain it to you that I am dead broke, but you refuse to believe that. Third, even if these phantom accounts did exist somewhere, do you seriously think that I have the access information in my head? I would need access to my financial records to get bank account and routing numbers in order to access these phantom accounts. That's all moot anyway because there are no accounts. If you believe that these accounts somehow exist, would you be so kind as to show me the account info for them? What happened to all the money from your checking account, savings account, and investments then? I told you that last time. It was a couple of very bad investments. I took a chance and got wiped out. What about the money from the sale of your company? The company was in bad shape because of those investments. I had to sell it cheap and use the payments to cover expenses. There isn't any money left over. Mr. Nissan, do you actually think that this court believes that hogwash? I shrugged. I really don't care if you think I'm lying. Show me the account information where I'm hiding all that money. What I think is that she stole all the money and is trying to screw me over while she is screwing her boyfriends. That doesn't even make sense, shouted her lawyer. It makes as much sense as keeping me in jail where I have no access to money than demanding that I make all of these payments you all want, I responded. Mr. Nissan, are you aware that I can keep you in jail until you pay? The judge asked. I just looked at her like she had just grown a third eye. Okay, I'll play along. Go ahead and keep me where I am unable to abide by your orders as you keep making demands that are simply impossible for me to accomplish. That sounds logical. 3 months later, the house had been foreclosed on. Wanda had lost her Lexus because she couldn't afford the payments. She was now living with her parents because she couldn't afford an apartment for her and the girls. She was working 30 hours a week at the diner. They were begging the judge to let me out so I could start making some sort of payments. Loverboy had been released from the hospital and was in physical therapy. He was spending hours every day trying in vain to clear up his financial situation. The only good thing was that no new credit card accounts were being opened in his name. That's because his credit rating by this point was so low that no one was willing to issue any more credit cards in his name. He only had minimal insurance coverage on his car, so he didn't get anything from that. Since he didn't work full-time at the gym, he had personal health care insurance with very high deductibles. It was going to take him years to pay off his medical bills. I had finally gotten a lawyer. She had made a deal with the judge to let me out of jail so I could get a job and begin making payments. I had to surrender my passport because they were still convinced that I had money somewhere and I was a flight risk. I was a good boy and went to work at the local Taco Bell. By this time, I was living at the ranch with Howard and Cheryl. I was being watched in case I had a stash of cash laying around. Of course, I knew that and had easily figured out who was watching me. They couldn't come onto the ranch property, so they had to do their surveillance from the road. Little did they know that most of the cash was already in my possession. I did that for the next 3 months. Wanda used a court order to attach my wages from my job. I didn't care. I was making minimum wage, so she didn't get much. Over that time, I was finalizing my plans. Howard had emptied out my apartment while I was in jail. He had divided up everything between my extended family. A couple of weeks earlier, several packages had been shipped from my extended family. Those packages had all been addressed to the same location. Several of Cheryl's family members had been over to visit at different times. We even had a few barbecues with them as well as most of my extended family a few times. What the surveillance didn't see was that the guests would go over to the sheds behind the house and take some packages back to their vehicles throughout the day. Over the next couple of weeks, those packages would be repackaged and shipped away. My time was spent either working or at home. I never went out. Taco Bell eventually had to get a restraining order against Wanda because she was constantly coming into the restaurant to harass me about the money I owed her. It became disruptive. Sure, they could have simply fired me, but a slip of cash to the manager changed her mind on that. When I needed to meet with my lawyer, she came over to the ranch. We had a lot of meetings. Oh, I didn't tell you about my new lawyer? Of course I did. She was representing the interests of the new owners of my former company that day in court. Once she completed that, I hired her as my lawyer. She's a real shark too. Well, I prefer to think of her as a barracuda, especially when she is skinny dipping in the pool. She's sleek, lean, and will attack suddenly when I'm sitting naked on the edge of the pool. She also has a voracious appetite. Grin. What do you mean that it is unethical for a lawyer to sleep with their client? I did say she is a lawyer, right? An ethical lawyer? You're kidding, right? Lawyers believe scruples are what you use to pay in Russia and morals are large paintings on walls. Okay, so you are probably wondering about my money. Yes, I actually did sell my firm. No, I didn't sell it to myself. I was not going to give Wanda any chance to stumble upon any information that she could use to take any part of the firm. I was getting rid of it. Besides, I wanted the cash. Since the sale occurred overseas and the money never entered United States jurisdiction, it was not subject to U.S. laws. The only way that Wanda could touch it was if I brought any of the money into a U.S. bank. With the judgments against me, she could claim it. That simply was not going to happen. It was a lot of money. Added to that were my investment accounts that were in the $10 million range. Cash on hand from the safety deposit box, checking and savings accounts, and my safes with cash in them equaled around $200,000. Some of the cash I had used for my plans, but I still had around $150,000 on hand. I wasn't going to be taking any of the cash with me. So, it was a beautiful Saturday afternoon. We were having another barbecue with the extended family. All the preparations were complete and everything was set. The party was a lot of fun. I helped Howard with the grill and smoker. Julia, my lawyer, was there as well. Later in the afternoon, one of Cheryl's uncles walked up to me. He expressed his gratitude for me helping Cheryl and Howard out and was glad that we had finally reconnected. We talked for a bit and he pulled an envelope out and handed it to me. I passed it over to Julia so she could put it in her briefcase. Later in the evening, I made an announcement. I announced that the lien holder for the ranch had declared that the mortgage for the ranch had been paid off and that Howard and Cheryl now owned the ranch free and clear. That caused a huge celebration. We partied our asses off that night. It was late that night when the guests started to leave. Julia couldn't stay the night because she had a flight to catch the next morning. She left with a group of 6 other cars. Oddly, her flight was out of an airport in the next state. She had packed previously and had everything in her leased car when she came to the party. She never went to her rental apartment. Instead, she went straight to the airport. No one witnessed the man climbing out of the back of her car in the parking garage, and no one took notice of the man casually walking 50 feet behind her as they made their way to the international terminal. Michael Nielsen couldn't travel outside the U.S. because he had surrendered his passport to the court. Mitchell Nelson's passport never even garnered a second look. No one even gave a second look as they held hands in adjoining seats as they flew first class to Mexico City. Julia Davis suddenly disappeared there. Instead, Jamie Nelson joined Mitchell Nelson for their connecting flight to Ecuador. It was 2 days later when Greg and Samantha Cooper reached their hacienda on the Caribbean coast of Costa Rica. They were now multiple members of the Mile High Club. Oddly, an old Chevy pickup that resembled the one which disappeared from the ranch owned by Howard and Cheryl was waiting for them at the hacienda. 2 weeks after the barbecue, a bench warrant was issued for Michael Nielsen. He had failed to show up to work 2 days after the barbecue. He was fired for no show, no call. No payments to his ex-wife had been received since. When Howard and Cheryl were summoned before the court, a lawyer in a $5,000 skirt suit showed up with them. She successfully argued that the couple had no responsibility towards their cousin. He simply rented a room from them and he disappeared one day. They even produced their own suit against him for back rent. All the information that they could give was that he drove off in his old pickup one afternoon and just never came back. Of course, no one actually believed them, but there was no proof to the contrary. Over the next several years, Greg Cooper operated a small charter fishing boat. His wife, Samantha, ran their small cantina. They were well off in the small village. Their hacienda was one of the larger ones with several luxuries. They occasionally had guests visit for periods of time. Harold and Cheryl were there often, as well as other family members of Howard and Cheryl. It was a simple yet pleasant life for both Greg and Sam. They loved each other fully. They spent most evenings entertaining guests in the small cantina or in their lavish hacienda. Being both wealthy and pleasant to all around, they were both quickly accepted into the small community. Whenever a need was found in the community, they donated generously. It should be noted that Greg continually played the stock markets whenever he was not on his boat or in the cantina. He even set up accounts for some of the locals and assisted them in their finances. Oh, and the dishonorable Judge Marie Matthews? I actually laughed my ass off a few years after I had made my escape to Costa Rica. Judge Matthews' wife, of course, that man-hating witch was a lesbian, was caught cheating on her with a man. The judge had adopted her wife's 3 kids when they got married. Since they were married, Judge Matthews was stuck paying child support, maintenance, as well as maintaining house payments for her now ex-wife. To add to the humiliation, her ex-wife quickly moved her boyfriend into the house and continued to screw him. Whenever they were seen out in public, they acted like a typical married couple, except they never officially got married. I did hear a rumor that they finally set a wedding date. It will be a week after their youngest son graduates from college. Judge Matthews is required to pay child support and maintenance until the child graduates from college or until her ex-wife remarries. Odd timing on the marriage, it will be exactly 1 week after all of Judge Matthews' financial obligations to her ex-wife are satisfied.